So first we want to thank our generous sponsors for making this event possible. We really appreciate their support and making this a free event for today. This is Welcome to the Dark Side, Strategies for Implementing Dark Mode. My name is Megan McDermott. I work for a small agency called Village Webworks. This is a little bit about me. So Village Webworks is a small team that can do big things. We're based in Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. A small town of Elmira, north of Waterloo. I'm mainly a front-end specialist, but I work for a small team, so I do whatever needs to be done. Mainly a specialist in front-end, CSS, component library, theming, site building, and that sort of thing. I'm the organizer of the Waterloo Region Drupal Users Group, the Southwestern Ontario Drupal Camp, and I'm on the Drupal Event Organizing Working Group board. There's a bunch of ways you can find me. I'm a boring person who uses my own name, so I'm pretty easy to find on Slack or Drupal.org or LinkedIn. So this is just a funny comic that someone sent to me, so I thought it would be a good way to start out. It's a comic, and the first panel it's called Creation, and the first panel is dark, it's all black, and God said, "Let there be light." And the first panel is really bright, there's sun, there was light. Third panel, there's light on the earth, it's really brilliant and bright. And the last panel, it says that God saw that the light was, and someone interrupts and says, "Can you support dark mode?"
That's me.
Yes, that's more of the dark mode. If you go to XKCD, below the comics, they have a really neat view mode switcher, so they have lots of little different funny ways of viewing it, which might be especially funny if you're old enough to remember like what a screensaver is. All right, so there's a bunch of things we need to consider if you're implementing dark mode, and you might think that, oh, we're just going to flip the background color, the text color, and that will be all we need to do, but it's actually a little bit more to it than that. So you need to be able to design color schemes that are accessible and hopefully not too boring, black and white. We want to be able to respect the user's device settings, so whatever mode they have their device set to, and add a manual toggle for our use case. We need a way to build all this in CSS in a way that's not too messy and repeating a lot of color declarations and things like that. And then I found that there's just a bunch of other little design considerations, like things that don't work very well in dark mode versus light mode, and we want to be able to make some other kinds of adjustments beyond just what the colors are. So our example is pearsa.org. So this site is Perimeter Institute Recorded Seminar Archive. And if you're not familiar with them, Perimeter Institute is a really high-level research institute in theoretical physics based in Waterloo. This is a recorded seminar archive of all the talks that happen at Perimeter, courses, conferences, seminars, public outreach talks. So they have a whole system set up where they record everything. If you want to learn about theoretical physics, you can go on here. I've been working on this site for something like 7 years and kind of know what quantum gravity is. So this is a really good candidate for implementing dark mode because people spend a lot of time on here. There's a lot of students from around the world who use this to learn, and obviously we have videos on here, so people are going to be watching them. A lot of the videos, which you'll probably see at some point as I'm going through this, as we're looking at this site, have a lot of chalkboard, dark chalkboards, which they still use here some. Their lectures are all, a lot of these are done with chalk, writing on a board. So having a dark mode for this would be really, really helpful for the users. Okay, so some things to consider when you're designing the dark and light color schemes. Oh, this is the wrong slide. I need to see that. Okay. This is my cat Mina. So, as I mentioned earlier, swapping the dark and light colors is not really enough, and we can kind of see an example of this. This is what we just looked at, pearso.org, with the way it was before we started this project. It's a really basic color scheme. We've just got the plain blue, single primary color. It's used for the header background, it's used for links, it's also used for buttons, so it's pretty simple. We've got like 4 colors on here, basically. But when we flip the background color and we make the background color black, it just doesn't really look very good. The blue in the header, now that's too bright, and the blue with the links, now that doesn't have enough contrast, so we need to have some more color ranges available. The black is kind of maybe harsh, the white is kind of harsh, it just doesn't really look very good. So we need to add a lot more kind of variations to our color so this actually looks good and is easy on the eyes. So if we go to something like, we're going to look at, this is GitHub's dark mode. And you might be able to see, I hope you can see if you're looking at the screen here, that this is not quite black. It's actually very, very dark gray. And the text color is actually a very, very light gray. So this is something that you'll see a lot of sites do if you look at dark mode on different sites or apps that you use, is that the black is not black and the white is not pure white because it gets too harsh on the eyes if you're doing it that way. And if we were to like inspect this, you can actually see there's their background color. It's not quite black, and you can see their white color is not quite white, it's gray. So this is something that you just often need to soften colors a little bit when you're using dark mode. And here's another example. You can see the black on white is a little bit too dark, a little bit too harsh to read. If we make it a little more subtle, it's easier on the eyes. And you're doing this in cases where there's a lot of text, people are looking at screens a lot, so you want to make something that's going to be not too harsh on the eyes when you're looking at it. Here's a bunch of other design considerations. So sometimes the design treatments in dark mode just don't work very well in light mode, like hover states and drop shadows. So here's an example where we have a drop shadow, and it's just a subtle drop shadow on hover. And if you look at the dark mode, it's like, well, you can't really see that shadow is there. It just doesn't really look very good. I didn't really think that dark mode, the shadows work very well. So this is kind of a case where it's beyond the colors. It's some other design treatment that you might want to change if you're in dark mode versus light mode. Darkening images is another example where this, and it kind of depends on like the photography style or the image style on the site, but here you can see in dark mode the image on the left is just really, really bright and kind of garish. It's too bright when you're looking at this dark screen. So if we darken it a little bit, the image still has impact, but it's just not quite so harsh in dark mode. Another example that I wanted to look at is what happens if we just take a site and add automatic dark mode. So here's the new Drupal.org. You can see it's got a lot of gradients, a lot of punchy colors. What would happen if we just tried to flip the colors and do a simple dark mode? Well, we actually have this little toggle, and we can turn on automatic dark mode in Chrome, and you can kind of start to see some of the design decisions that you might have to make if you were implementing dark mode on a site. Like Drupal.org has these really bright punchy colors, but I don't know what you do with this bright orange and yellow if you were doing it in dark mode. They have this gradient here, I don't know, what do you do with that gradient? Do you just change the colors? The automatic dark mode kind of didn't fade out this background image. You'd have to do that, and we have more gradients, and this just starts to look ugly. Like that was a light blue before, and now it's this weird teal color. It just doesn't look very good. So the more complicated your design is, the more of these little micro design decisions you might have to make if you're trying to implement dark mode. There's more kind of stuff down here, like there's this big lavender section, something went wrong there. So it's not just as simple as flipping text and background colors. There's a lot more little things that you might need to do. All right, so making the switch. So for this project, I settled on dark mode toggle modules. So this has a nice way of adding both the light mode and the dark mode manual switch and respecting system preferences. And it stores it in session storage so that when the user comes back, it'll remember what their selection is. There's 2 versions available for this right now. The 1.x version is for Drupal 10 and 11. And it adds a .dark class, to the HTML tag, and sets dark mode data attributes, so where the source is from, and it'll say whether it's from the user system setting or not. And we're going to be able to use that a little bit later to determine if we're following the user system settings. The 2.x version is Drupal 11 only, and it just uses data attributes rather than the class. And so for the project that we're implementing, it hasn't been upgraded to Drupal 11 yet, so I'm going to be talking about using the dark class on the HTML tag. If you implemented the 2.x version, it's got the data attributes, so that's just a little difference in what I'm talking about. So I have a patch for a nice toggle in here, a nice user interface for this. So when you actually first install this module, it just looks like plain buttons. Like, it will just look like this when you first install it. You just get these plain light, dark, and system buttons. So you might not want to have to reinvent your own UX for that. So I have a component here that I've contributed, so you can get that if you want to use these nice little icons instead of having those buttons there. Before we get going on some cool CSS tricks, here's another way, a little way to switch between your system preferences while you're working. So if you want to be able to test the system setting, you have it set to system, you want to be able to switch back and forth, there's a little toggle here in DevTools. So in Firefox, you can see it right here, kind of in your CSS inspector. There's the sun or the dark mode setting. Of course, this is the old version, which hasn't implemented it. And in Chrome, we're going to go to GitHub is one of the only sites that I found that actually has automatic dark mode actually working. And in Chrome, it's this little paintbrush. So I can switch myself to prefers color scheme dark, and that's just a little tool that you can use if you're developing and you want to be able to quickly switch between without having to delve into your system preferences and figure out where that is again. So, now, we're going to need a lot of different color values, and what we kind of looked at before is that, you know, these 2 simple black and white or 2 little shades of blue are just not going to be enough. And as you can expect, in light mode, light gray is more contrast, and dark gray is less contrast. Sorry, light gray is less contrast, dark gray is more contrast, and dark mode, light gray is more contrast. So you can see how it's flipped. And so you end up needing like a lot of different color ranges, right? Before you might have been able to get away with, you know, just your light mode colors, your text color border, you might have a neutral background color and a page background color. And that's what you need. But now in dark mode, this is flipped. So now we need a lot more neutral colors. So it's pretty common in a web design to have, you know, light gray borders, light gray backgrounds, you have your text color, your background color. So now we need more color ranges, and this is something that I found that we need to set up before we really get into specifying what the colors are, because we just need a lot more range available. We need, what our light mode text color background color, borders, our neutral background colors, just need a lot of light grays and different shades of neutrals. So if we use like a number gradation of colors, then we can handle this a lot better. And if you probably got into situations like this before, where you just end up with all these light grays or variations of your primary color, like you start out and you think you have this set up, and you think the designer has only 2 light grays in here, but then no, you find another one. Or now you have a use case for a third one, and it's like the naming just gets to be ridiculous. Like you have your gray light and your gray extra light, or however you like to name your color values. So I'm starting to see designers do this a lot more, where you have like numbered variations here, where you have like a 900, which is really light, an 800, a little bit less light, and so on and so forth. And you might do that for your neutral colors like grays, your primary colors, secondary colors, and then it's a lot easier to try and pick one that's going to work in different situations, like in dark mode. So where we saw that example where we just quickly switched the colors and now the blue didn't have enough contrast. Well, now we need a brighter blue. So if we define our primary colors in a way like this, we just have a lot more options to choose from. And if we need something that's brighter with more contrast for dark mode, it's there. If we need another shade of gray for light mode or dark mode, then it's here, and we're not kind of trying to label it with some extra light or lighter or some silly value like that. All right, so we're going to get into some pretty cool tricks for doing dark mode. And you might think that, well, we could just do this. Like, we could just redeclare all our custom properties. We have our color default text value, our default background color. Just apply that to the html.dark class, and there you go, right? So we'll just redeclare everything. And I've seen a lot of sites do this, but you're repeating a lot of stuff. It could get out of sync. You add another color property, and then you have to remember to add it to both, so it can get to be a mess. And of course, this doesn't apply to users who have their system preference set to dark mode. So the first really cool trick is light dark color values. And I was really amazed to find out that this is supported and it works. So you can define both your dark mode and light mode color values in one declaration. So it's really, and this works based on the system preference. So in the first value is for light mode, we want our, say, text color to be black. In dark mode, it would be white. It's all in one place. This has been supported since May 2004, so it's pretty new, but it's pretty cross-browser compatible. It can be used in any color value, like background colors or borders or whatever. And yeah, it's based on system settings. So we still have a problem with that dark class, but that's okay. We're going to get to a way to address that in a few minutes. So here's a little bit more robust example. So we have our blacks, we have our white, which is already a light dark value, and that's using a more bright white for light mode, a little bit more of a light gray for dark mode. We have a couple blues. I find that using HSL notation for doing colors in dark mode is really helpful, because then we can just get a bunch of different variations of the colors, and we know that they're using the same hue, and just vary the saturation and lightness to get some different variations. If you lived in an ideal world, maybe your designer would specify all this ahead of time and have everything spec'd out and beautiful, but I don't live in that world. We just have to kind of figure it out as we go. And then we have our default text and default background values that are set using light dark and use those initial values. So you can even see that we can pass a light dark value into a light dark value. So we've got our white defined in light dark, and then we can pass that into our default text, and that will be white in dark mode. And here's just a strategy that I came up with for defining neutrals, because we had so many light grays in here and different shades of gray, and light gray is light gray. Light gray is low contrast in light mode and high contrast in dark mode. So I have kind of a scale of neutrals here, going from kind of light in light mode, dark in dark mode, to more contrast, which would be black in light mode and white in dark mode, just using hue, saturation, and lightness. So it's just kind of a way to kind of get a bunch of grays that are available and will have a more or less contrast in light mode or dark mode. But then how do we make this apply when the class is present, when the dark class is present, and when the user's system setting is set to dark? Well, then we have this really good property, color scheme, that we can go ahead and declare what color scheme we want to apply for a certain element. So here we can just tell our .dark class that this is going to use color scheme dark, and then it'll use the dark colors from our light dark values. And this also applies dark mode to system elements like forms, scroll bars, buttons, and some operating systems that don't let you customize them too much. And we can just use this for some dark sections. So I've got a little code pen here where we can kind of see a really basic setup of this. And so we have kind of just like the example that we looked at a few minutes ago. We have our color white and black defined in light dark mode. We have our background colors, and then we have some sections here that are applying color scheme dark, light and dark. So the first panel, this is light mode. Then our second panel, if we just declare our color scheme dark, we can just do it on that section. And then we have another section here where we've got like a light mode section with a dark mode inside it. And you might be able to think about how this could be used in a lot of different just parts of a site, where you might have, I don't know if you've come across things like this, where we have a design system and there's lots of combinations of background and foreground colors, and the communications team thinks they want to have all of these implemented. We need to have all these background colors. They never use them. They only use the blue ones. But this had to be implemented, and all of these have these button colors, and they all have link colors, and it just gets to be crazy to try and write this, because, oh yeah, okay, these backgrounds need this button color. But you can imagine how you might be able to use color scheme to just set the color scheme dark on the dark backgrounds, use light dark for your color values, and then your code is going to be a lot simpler. Okay. Now, so that's got the colors out of the way. It's a really good way to define all our colors, but what do we want to do if we want to do some other styling that's not just switching the colors, that is going to work for the color scheme dark setting and the dark class? So we're going to do a little bit of review here. I don't know how much knowledge you'll have of different kinds of queries. So everyone probably knows what a media query is. It's really basic, beginner CSS kind of stuff. There's a preferred color scheme query. So this is something we can keep in our toolbox to apply some different CSS, just if the user's preference is set to dark mode. We've also got this really cool thing called container queries. Now these are really, really cool, and you can do lots of really awesome stuff with this, but that's a topic for another day. But we are going to make use of this container query where you can just query. You can specify what a container is, or it would just be like the whole document if you don't specify. So what we're going to do is use a style query, style container query, and a custom property. So this is like a container query on the presence of a style. And this is really newly implemented. There's a lot more stuff in the spec that you can do with container queries. But for this one, with the container style queries, for right now, you can just query on the presence or value of a custom property. So what we're going to do is we're going to set a custom property when the color scheme is set to dark and the class is set on the HTML tag. So now we have a custom property. It's just like a variable that we're going to use to tell if we're supposed to be in dark mode or not. Yeah, so we're going to apply it using the preferred color scheme dark media query. And here we're using that data attribute that the module set on the HTML tag, so that we can make sure that we're not accidentally setting this if the user, if it's actually manually set to light mode, and that's the default for the module. So we want to make sure that we're only targeting this when the selection is set to system. And we're going to set our custom property. The theme is going to be dark. We're going to set that custom property again on when the dark class is present. And then we can query it. So we can just apply things in that container query. This is not supported by Firefox right yet, but that's okay. We'll use it for some progressive enhancement. It's not things that are going to be that important. It's just a little bit of things that are going to look a little bit nicer. So here's our alternate design for that card that had the drop shadow on it. So this is just a hover state, and I thought that the drop shadow really wasn't very visible in dark mode. So we chose to add a border here instead, and sort of the code is a little bit cut off at the bottom, but you can see that it's querying against the value of theme custom property and just going to set an outline on there instead of using a shadow. All right, image filters. So we wanted to darken our images a little bit in dark mode, and that's my cat Sakura there in the little box. And so this is another kind of newer thing in CSS that you can use filter effects to darken images, and there's lots of different things that you can do. With filter effects, and you can play around with them like it's 1999 and you just got your first copy of Photoshop or something, and do some silly things if you want. But here we're just going to tone down the brightness, increase the contrast a little bit, so our images are just not quite so bright. And yeah, there's more on filter effects that you can look up at different things that you can do with that. Okay. So we're going to put it all together, and you can see where we ended up. Sorry, I keep trying to Alt-Tab, but that's not what I'm trying to do. And this is going to be the new Pearsa.org that we're launching hopefully next week. And you can see they decided to go with a dark blue kind of background here, and it kind of makes their chalkboard images stand out a bit more. And we have our light mode and our dark mode toggle, and system preferences. So we can use dark mode system preferences and light mode. We have this is our little hover that we looked at a few minutes ago, where it's a drop shadow on light mode. And if we go to dark mode, oh, this is Firefox. We have to look at this in Chrome, I'm sorry. So in Chrome and dark mode, we'll be able to see this outline. So that's where our container query on the style is going to apply. And I'm going to show you what kind of our variable style is. This is kind of a very simplified version of what we ended up with for colors. So I don't think you actually need to declare the color scheme supports light dark. You might read that in some documentation, and you have to declare this. I don't think this is actually necessary anymore, but you might want to just test that. So we have our initial color set up. We have a lot of blues available. We want to make sure that there's enough contrast. So this last one is, really bright. We have our neutral values that go from, very white in light mode, dark in dark mode, and that design has just a lot of kind of shades of neutral, like dark backgrounds, borders, all kinds of things. So we want a lot of options to be available there. We have our white, which is white in light mode, and not quite white in dark mode. We have different variations of our primary colors and our secondary colors. We have an accent color that we want to have it nice and bright in dark mode, so there's enough contrast. And we have our default text and background colors, and our link and link hover colors, and so on. Here we are setting our two values on the dark class. So we have our custom property, the theme custom property that we're going to use in our container query, and we set the color scheme to dark. So here's a little example of how we would set a different default background color if the color scheme is dark. So that's kind of a simplified version of what the CSS is in behind here. Are there any questions right now? Yep.
So I have a theme that I've developed, and I let the user, well, not the, just anyone, but the site administrator, pick the colors that they want. Do you have some kind of, and it's all in CSS, do you have a way to automatically pick dark versions of colors, no matter what color it is?
There is a new thing that I just heard about. It's like, I might even have a tab here that was open really recently. It's like, it's like CSS contrast color. Let me see what it is in here. That's really new. Contrast color, this is it. So this is really new, but this is something you might be able to use for something like that, where it's automatically going to take a color and return a contrasting color. So this is something that might help with something like that, but if you're having users enter colors, like is it something like through
A color picker.
a color picker? Yeah, so that's going to be something that's not going to be easy to automatically figure out, but something like this might be able to help you with that in the future if it's implemented. If you can like, yeah, it's just going to give them a hex code, right? It's not, is it going to put that into a custom property? If it does, then you might be able to use something like this and get it to return a contrasting color. That's enough, that's going to work. It's going to be trying to kind of hit and miss, I think.
You know, I haven't read the description of this, but could I use this to automatically control the color of text over a given background color?
That's what this is meant to do. It's not really compatible yet. Let's just see where it's at right now. This is actually pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. You could try this. I haven't played around with this, so a friend of mine just told me about it like 2 days ago. So, but that's something that could potentially work for something like that, where it's gonna return a contrasting color against what?
So the contrast color would calculate the whether the text should be white or black, depending on.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's what it's gonna do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just gonna put white or black. Now, is it like named white or black? Probably. Yeah. But that could potentially be useful. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yes, when you're designing a dark mode, you have to allow for the fact that a user might be using an extension like Dark Reader, and if so, are there collisions possible?
Yeah, I don't really even know about that, actually.
Like, does one override the other? Or?
Right, and like if people are using an extension like that, then is the extension smart enough to know if the site already implements dark mode or not? How would it know? Yeah, I actually don't know about that.
Just have to experiment with that.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a little bit of review. We're going to start with a range of colors. You need a lot more options than you're going to need in typical website design. You want to make sure you have enough values to have enough contrast. You need a lot of neutrals, because you're going to always need a lot of different shades of gray or whatever your neutral is for different things. You're going to use light dark to define your color values that will let dark mode pick the right one and simplify your CSS a lot. You can use color scheme to set dark mode in different selectors, so then you can have a section or different situations where you're going to apply your dark mode values instead of light. We're going to use a style query with a custom property to apply other design treatments in dark mode, and we can use filter effects to darken our images a little bit. So I have a bunch of resources here and links. I don't know if there's a way for me to put my slides up. You know how to find me if you want to see them or see any links or have any questions later. Megan McDermott, just look for me on LinkedIn or Slack or whatever. And that's everything. Are there any more questions? Okay, I think I have technically have 5 minutes left. So yeah, just let me know if you have any more questions or if you're interested in talking about these things. I'm the organizer of the Southwestern Ontario Drupal Camp, so this is happening October 23rd, 24th in Kitchener-Waterloo. So come on down, bring your talks, watch out for more information. Yeah?
I have a use case for you.
Okay.
This is great. Browsers. What about email?
Email. Yeah, I don't
Because
know.
I'm seeing
Yeah.
some of the things that we're sending around, like especially in Outlook, when people get into Outlook, it is awful.
Yeah.
And I don't know how well implemented these standards are into, I mean, I know there's a million, everybody knows you go to test an email, you got to test it against 4,000 different possible outcomes, but in terms, especially, I mean, Outlook's a big one because a lot of people have that installed. Microsoft Suite, so.
Yeah, right? Would that even work? And I don't even know what the state of CSS support is in emails anymore. It's not something that thankfully I had to deal with very much lately. Yes.
If it's web-based, you're fine. But if you're looking at Outlook client, I think it's IE 10 based for the rendering engines.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah. So yeah, speakers wanted for Southwestern Ontario Drupal Camp. You can also go to drupalcanada.org and find out about other events coming up in Canada. There's lots of active meetup groups in Ottawa, London, Toronto, and Kitchener-Waterloo. Some of us run online, so come and join our meetup groups. You can find out more at drupalcanada.org. I think at the registration desk there are shiny new Drupal Canada stickers, if they should still have some around. So that's everything. Thanks so much for coming. I hope you learned a lot and you're ready to go back and apply dark mode or even just use some light dark or some of these other cool tricks in your work. I have a couple things up front. Yeah, I have a couple of things up front. I have a few pens left. If you need a mid-afternoon chocolate, there's one up here, so come grab one on your way out. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. Dark chocolate?
Yeah, the dark ones are dark chocolate, and the light ones, see, it's dark, light and dark. The light ones are milk chocolate, and the dark ones are dark chocolate. So, yeah.